Hey, welcome back, Brad Tragic, and a new video series. Oh yes, trying to come up with new series, and this kind of popped into my head. Um, Basically, it's a wrestler spotlight series, and this time it's going to be on Ed Leslie, or as everybody else knows, Brutus the Barber Beefcake. So let's talk about the guy who everybody knows as Brutus Barber Beefcake. Now, if you think back, I'm basically going to talk about a little bit of history. Um, and then I'm basically going to talk about what I remember of him and my thoughts on him. But he started in the WWF, and I'm kind of reading off a website, so bear with me if I'm kind of like, oh, I'll try not to be a deer in the headlights. But basically, he started with Hulk Hogan. Hulk Hogan got him or that's how he got his popularity, is being a buddy with Hulk Hogan, and he started it, and they build them as brothers. Him and Hulk Hogan, he would play Ed Boulder alongside Terry Boulder, Hulk Hogan, and then he would play Dizzy Hogan beside Hulk Hogan, and early in between 1976 and 77, and then he was wrestling for Bill Watts from 80 between 80 and 82, uh, and then that would culminate later on into Brutus Beefcake. His first match was against Ron Slinker. Was with Ron Slinker against Ox Baker and Eric Thread. So basically, he started as a tag team wrestler. That's how he started. And then from '84 to 1990, he was in the WWF. And I know a lot of people, like, if you go back and if you're a kid in that era in the '90s and the late '80s to early '90s, if you were a kid, um, you might remember him being a tag team, but if you go back now and you like just started watching like in the '90s, you don't really remember that he was in a tag team. And when you're young like that, you don't really care. So when you get older, you start to look back at old matches and you're like, oh, well, he was in a tag team. Um, and he actually had the tag team championship, and they were actually a really really great team. Him and Greg Denver Valentine. And if you go back and watch that stuff, and then watch Brutus Beefcake stuff, sometimes you have to take it all and go, wow, what happened? Why couldn't he do that as Bruce the Barber Beefcake? Because I don't think he really did that. They didn't really let him perform that way when he was Brutus the Barber Beefcake. So that's kind of something kind of weird. Um, he did that. So basically, the Dream Team broke up at WrestleMania 3, which that was with Greg Valentine. If I forgot to go into that, um, and then he had a match to face Adrian Adonis, and it basically was a uh, oh, okay. No, he didn't have a match with Adrian. It was a Roddy Piper who had a match against Adrian Adonis, and the stipulation in the match was if the loser, whoever hit the loser, that doesn't make any sense. Whoever lost the match would have to get their head haircut. So it's a haircut match, not like a hair shave match like they. This is the old style. You had to use scissors. It didn't exist. Hair shavers don't exist right now, I guess, because they couldn't afford hair shavers back then. But his match between Piper and Adrian Adonis, and then Adrian Adonis lost the match, and that started the feud between Beefcake and Adrian Adonis, I believe. Um, Beefcake came in with the big old shears and he was cutting Adrian Adonis's hair, and that was the first time I think you've seen him with the shears or started the whole thing with that. So it was pretty cool. That's what started that. Not the first one. There was other people I guess that did that. But it was first time you've seen it in the WWE. I think like in a big thing like that, and that got over. I think Adrian Adonis kind of did it, but I don't think he was like super over with the fans as a you know. And then basically he had a boating accident. Um, he did have a boating accident. Before we get to that though, Beefcake actually was the first person to end Mr. Perfect he was the person to end Mr. Perfect's winning streak on TV. So there you go. But in 1990, he had a boat accident, and I remember this because um, I remember this happening because he'd been off TV for a while. I think I don't know if he was with another injury or something, but he had the boating incident, and they were talking about it on TV, and they talked about it in the magazine. I think they talked about it in the magazine more, but when he actually made his return, um, he had a mask on and he was talking. Um, but the way that they did it was, to have him get put through a glass uh, during the barbershop segment with Shawn Michaels and Mark Jannetty. So that's pretty cool the way they put him out. And then, at the whole thing to put, I think, Beefcake out of the WWE, um, for a while again, they had Sid put him through the plate glass window in the final barbershop thing you would see. And then he came back and tag team with Hulk Hogan against DiBiase and ROS. Money Inc. Came back to those Mega Maniacs with Hulk Hogan, and they won the tag team championships, I believe. I'm not sure if they won the championship. I can't remember. But he did come back and wrestle with Hogan one last time as the Mega Maniacs. And then basically you kind of didn't see him in wrestling for a while. And then he, after a year from being gone from the wrestling scene, he showed up in WCW. Uh, and he can't use that name, so he showed up. And I guess he kept on doing appearances when he first as Brother Brutus, um, for a long time. Um, but then he came in to WCW as being an assailant that injured, that attacked Hulk Hogan, and ended up being the Butcher, is what they call uh, and Leslie. So it's pretty cool. And he's put into the Three Faces of Fear with Kevin Sullivan and Avalanche, who was Earthquake previously in the WWE. So that was pretty cool. And it culminated in the world title match at Starrcade, I believe, between the Butcher and Hulk Hogan. So that's pretty cool. Probably one of the best, probably one of the highlights of his career, I would assume, being in the World Championship match. Um, that the Honky Tonk Man thing happened with him. But he wrestled as the Butcher for a long time. Even after the Three Faces of Fear broke up, he wrestled as and I remember this time frame, but just reading over this, it makes me remember a lot more of what happened with him. You've seen other gimmicks in WCW. They call him the Booty Man, and oh lord, do we really want to go into that? But then he basically, he vanished from WCW after he did the Booty Man, and the Booty Man lasts for probably about 6 months or a year or so. But when NWO started, Booty Man, tried to join. He was beat down. And he basically, he vanished from TV. And then he disappeared for a while. And then Hulk Hogan basically said he had a bodyguard. I remember at one point, and he said, "Here he is." And it ended up being Ed Leslie, and they called him the Disciple. And I think this is around the time that the Warrior came in. Yeah, it is. It is the time that the Warrior came in to do the storyline in WCW, and so there you go. And then I guess he's right now he's in kind of semi-retirement, I guess, right now. Uh, so he's not really like wrestling right now much. I know it says he's a coach on the reality TV television show, Celebrity Championship Wrestling. He was a host on there. Um, so yeah, there you go. So yeah, he did a lot of things in his career. I mean, we're talking about his championships and accomplishments. Well, first of all, his finishing moves. Um, He had one called the Apocalypse, I guess, a sit out. Before the Facebook, yeah, Jawbreaker. I don't know what that is. Running high knee, a sleeper hold was basically, his move. He was managed, during his career by Johnny Valiant, Miss Elizabeth, the Booty Babe, which I believe was the Diamond Dallas Page's wife, Kimberly, I believe. I could be wrong. Jimmy Hart, he was managed by them. Well, he was at Hogan, so he's been managed by them. Now his championship accomplishments, he was a BCW Brew City Wrestling Tag Team Champion. One time with Greg Denver Valentine. He was a CWI Heavyweight Champion one time. Championship Wrestling International is what that organization's called. He held the Southern Championship Wrestling, NWA Southeastern Tag Team Championship Wrestling Championship 3 times with Ken Lucas. 2 times with Ken Lucas, 1 time with Robert Fuller. And then Legends Pro Wrestling. He was a XWF LPW Hall of Fame inductee, class of 2008 and 2010. Then he was a Maple State Wrestling Slam All Star Wrestling Tag Team Champion 1 time with Shane Williams. The Worldwide Wrestling Alliance Heavyweight Champion 1 time. World Wrestling Federation Tag Team Championship 1 time with Greg Denver Valentine. Whole thing in his career, in WWF career, 1 time Tag Team Champion. You think about that. Brutus the Barber Beefcake, an iconic figure. Everybody remembers Brutus the Barber Beefcake. If you don't, go watch the videos on some videos somewhere online. Sure, you can find them somewhere. Probably WWE has some up there somewhere. I mean, I would assume. Pro Wrestling Illustrated, he was in '95, he was ranked number 75 of the 500. 2003, he was ranked 173 of the 500 best single wrestlers. And then in 2003, he was actually ranked number 94 as one of the best tag teams in the PWI years. So there you go. So there you are. And that's been Ed Leslie. So now let's talk about what I remembered from Brutus Beefcake. Beefcake. So I remember, okay, so I talked about this in a previous video. My dad bought, Royal Rumble 1990. So continually I would watch this pay-per-view over and over and over and over again. Him and the Genius had an awesome match on this card. It was an awesome match. I always liked it, but the way it ended is just like, But back then, it was more like he was really towards kids, and there would always be like false endings, and there wouldn't be a whole lot of clean finishes. If there would be a clean finish, sometimes there might be a funky ending, or the manager shoves him back in the ring, and everybody's going, "Yeah, get him!" But it wouldn't be technically a clean match. So it's like, But it was a decent match. I like Beefcake. That's the one thing I remember him facing the Genius. But that hit with the shears. I always like when you just cut people's hair and you see him cut it and he takes the hair and just throws it up in the air. And, it was a great moment, in wrestling history to go back and watch Beefcake and what he's done. Especially in WCW, seeing him, and I'm like, what are they doing with him now? When he was, the Butcher and, things like that. If you talk about, and I know there's a name that I was trying to think, they called him. Okay, so in the WCW, they called him the Butcher. They called him the Booty Man. They called him the Disciple. But the one thing that they didn't really say anything about was Zodiac. They call him the Zodiac. I'm looking for it. I don't see it really in the thing here. But they called him the Zodiac. They call him the Zodiac. At some point during the thing, and when I saw them call him the Zodiac on WCW, and I seen the gimmick, I was like, oh my god, what have they done? Why can't they just stick with one name? He is like a legend. It's like, why do they keep messing with this guy? And the same thing with Earthquake. They called him Avalanche. They called him Shark. They called him everything in the book. It's like, why can't they just stick with one name for the guy when they come in? It's like, if you got one goofy gimmick that the gimmick ain't gonna work, then just use their real name. It's like, it's kind of pointless, you know. If you try a gimmick out, it's not gonna work. If you're gonna try basically the same gimmick, then there's no need. Yeah. Keep changing and adding, goofy gimmicks to it. It's like, I don't know. But going back and looking, it's like, yeah, Brutus Beefcake was an awesome gimmick for him. After getting out of the tag team scene. But looking back on it, it was like, I kind of wonder if they never should have broke him off from a tag team and just kept him into the tag team scene, just kept him around that way. And then eventually he probably would have got over it when he became a big star. But I think going back and looking at everything, he actually probably was a better heel than he was a face. Butcher was awesome. He could have got over as the Butcher, like being the Butcher, like for the longest time in WCW. And if he would have took that character into the WWE or WWF at the time, I think he would have got over. What's possibly it could be a whole different WWE right now if the Butcher would have been involved and probably could still be involved. So it'd be interesting to see. I don't think he's in the Hall of Fame yet, but if he's not, I would not be surprised if he don't go in the Hall of Fame. This year, next year, year after. Probably before WrestleMania 30. I would assume that he probably will be in the Hall of Fame just because he had close ties to Hulk Hogan, and they can't put Macho Man in right now for some reason. I kind of hope they do, but soon. But I don't know what's going to happen. But I think Bruce Beefcake will end up going into the Hall of Fame before Macho Man goes in. So that's been my Ed Leslie, Brutus the Bar Beefcake Wrestling Spotlight, Wrestler Spotlight. There you go. Tell me who you think I should talk about next. I would definitely do a video on them and tell you things about them. I'm kind of going for the lesser known guys like Beefcake. Probably might do Axel and Jim Duggan next, where you know him, but he's not like huge over. All right, thank you guys. Keep on watching.